Fullview has been carrying many stories and interviews on the high prevalence of underage and teen pregnancies, which often loops back to the question of whose responsibility is it to report and prevent. Well, thousands have now signed a petition to force doctors and midwives to report the incidents to the police. Right now, the Department of Education has the Prevention and Management of Learner Pregnancy in Schools Act, which makes it compulsory for schools to report cases to the authorities. This move is intended to widen the scope of awareness and reporting. Social Actionist and K-Squared Group Chief Technology Officer Kekeletso Khena joins me now. Good evening to you and welcome to the program. Kekeletso, it's lovely to have you with us. Pity, about the subject that we're talking about, but I want to start with this. Did you expect such a big response? And tell us a little bit about what triggered your activism in this regard, or actionism. Is this a new term? You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Oh, technology got the better of me there.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me, and good evening to you and the viewers at home. What actually started this campaign was how, South Africans generally get very outraged whenever we see the statistics of child pregnancies when they're released. And when the latest ones were released, and there was a big outcry about how these children, particularly ones that were between the ages of 10 and 14, were falling pregnant, I thought to myself, there has got to be something that we do. Why is it that we don't know who is impregnating these children? We don't know who the fathers are. We don't know how 14-year-olds, 10-year-olds are getting pregnant. There's no data that is helping us to do this. And we went to the police to try and find out how this is happening and whether or not there were cases of statutory rape that were being opened, because we know as activists on the ground that whenever we know of children who are pregnant, there's generally someone who's much older who is involved, and yet there are no cases that kind of support our findings on the ground. And I knew at that point that there was a loophole, or maybe several. And like with most people who've interacted with the campaign, most people seem to think that the Child Protection Act actually enables anyone in society, including the healthcare sector, to make the pregnancies of minors a notifiable incident. But actually that is not the case. Where the health workers are concerned, they are bound by the doctor-patient privilege. And as a result, they cannot disclose when a child is pregnant. And this is why these people are getting away with it. But there's also another addition to this. An older person can get a 10-year-old pregnant or 12-year-old pregnant. And the 12-year-old can go and get an abortion without the parents even finding out. And so there's quite a lot of loopholes where pedophiles are getting away with raping our children. I think this is why we came to the understanding that this campaign was necessary.
So the health minister, has over the last while in the health ministry tried several measures to deal with exactly what you're talking about. And our understanding is that health, and this is what the health department has shared with us, that the health workers are forced to report cases of pregnancies below the ages of 18. Does this not cover the area that you're wanting a coverage on, which is the midwives, the doulas, the doctors, and anyone who is involved in the extermination or the termination of a pregnancy?
No, it doesn't cover them, and I think this is why we ran the campaign. We actually reached out to the Department of Health, and we asked them, why is this not a policy already? I mean, it doesn't make sense that it's not a policy already. And they gave us flimsy excuses about how they're trying to protect children so that the children can come forward and get help. Where in retrospect, we need to have this policy to protect children so that pedophiles are not actually making children pregnant and getting away with it. So we are engaging with the Department of Health. They've agreed to a meeting in October thanks to the signatures, but obviously we still need a lot more. But the Department of Health has agreed to engage with us so that we can look at how maybe we can hear them out, because the kind of excuses that they're giving us are not enough for us to think it's not necessary to actually have a fully blown policy on this. We spoke to health workers who are saying that the patient-doctor confidentiality does not enable them to do what it is that we need them to do, which is notify the police. But not just that. Imagine a 10-year-old who is now pregnant. goes to the hospital to give birth, there is no mental health support for that child. There's not a program, there's no infrastructure to make sure that that child can actually cope. And by having this policy, we are looking to the enforcement department to go beyond just being able to open statutory rape cases, but to also to develop a framework within which this 10, 14-year-old can then be supported to be able to deal with this new reality.
Kekeletso, one of the other issues is, sorry to interject there, a very, very poignant point that you're making. The problem is that in a lot of cases, minors are whisked away from school. Sometimes, they're kept hidden, and this ensures that, what you're pursuing will ensure it doesn't stay that way. And in the case of minors, that steps can actually be taken. This sounds, again, part of the bigger, architecture of response that's needed is the community very much has to have its eyes and ears open and to play that role, right, in a way that doesn't create a persecutory environment for the victim.
Absolutely. And that's another thing. I mean, in starting this campaign, whenever a child is pregnant, the child is always blamed. We are always patholizing children. This child is forward. This child was, chasing older men. Nobody seems to recognize that first and foremost, this is a child who may have been taken advantage of, which is generally the case. We also talk of the issues of consent, where, even in the case where the person that they slept with is just a little bit older, when it's 2 years older, you've already, trespassed the age of consent, and now you are talking against statutory rape. But in this case, for instance, if the mother does, in fact, because one of the things that happens is that parents take the children and then they have them, so you have this person say it's a teacher, which is a common occurrence. A teacher will then pay the parents for the virginity and say, oh no, 2 cows, we paid 2 cows for virginity, we paid a cow for Ndaulo, and this thing now goes away. Now, if the parents agree to this because they're thinking somebody has to maintain this child, and then they take this child to a doula to assist with childbirth, the community would now know that 14-year-old Sibongile has now given birth. The person who helped Sibongile to give birth and did not notify the authorities must then be held legally accountable for not reporting this issue. So we are trying to close as many loops as are possible to make sure that we can protect children, because the incongruencies of the current laws and that exist in the country, where one law does not speak to the other, is creating the kind of loopholes where children are being raped and nobody has the information and nothing is being done about it.
Yeah, absolutely. In between the legal silo are the gaps, where people fall through, and real issues, as you've been describing with us, get lost. So we'll keep an eye on this one, definitely. We'll also get a response from the Health Ministry. Hopefully we can set that up for a little bit later in the program. I know that we've already reached out. Social Actionist and K-Squared Group Chief Technology Officer, Kekeletso Khena.